Welcome to the Spark by Hollywood podcast. I am your host, Devora Goldberg. In this podcast, I guide my listeners through a deeper look into the parallel paradigm of Hollywood versus Jewish ideas, love, relationships, and empowerment, and uncover which one is truly attainable and sustainable for us as Jews to achieve. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining today's episode of the Sparked by Hollywood podcast. Today, I'm joined by an incredible guest, Malka Chana Amichai, otherwise affectionately known on Instagram and beyond as the Bohemian Balabusta. Malka Chana, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
As you know, this past Monday was Mother's Day. It was Sunday. This is a day which is celebrated in households across the globe. You are a mom with a beautiful family. You're an entrepreneur. You're a teacher. And your message to moms out there is super empowering. But I find that beyond your messaging, beyond your words, I find that you yourself are an example. You yourself, you're an empowering person. And I think that because you live what you preach, I think that's what makes you so relatable to others. So to start off, can you tell my audience a little bit about yourself, maybe your background, what do you do, and what made you start the Bohemian Balabusta movement, I guess?
Sure. So I'm originally from South Florida. I moved to Israel about 14 years ago. I got married about 13 years ago. We have four kids, thank God. And when I moved to Israel, I started my career in women's health, specifically surrounding birth. I always wanted to be a teacher, specifically a public school teacher. And then when I moved to Israel, American public school didn't exist here. So I was looking for a way to educate others, but in a more alternative fashion rather than through the school system. So I started as a postpartum doula. It was before I even had my own children. I really loved working with women and educating and empowering other people. So I figured, okay, great. After birth, that's like a very vulnerable time for women. Let's start there. And then from there, I just felt like I kept having to get to women sooner. They needed support before that. So then I became a birth doula, and then I became a childbirth educator, and then I became a prenatal yoga teacher, and then I became a college teacher teaching brides. So my entire career went backwards in realizing that women need support before these pivotal life cycle events. So that was my field for about 10 years. I did births mostly for 10 years. And then after the birth of my fourth child, I just felt like my number one priority in life is being a mother, and it always has been. And at this point in my career, because I had a name and because I had so many clients, it just felt like I was putting other people's families before my own. And I wasn't okay with that. So I stopped, which was a very bold move and a difficult move, because now, like, that decision was 3 years ago and I still get calls asking for births, if I can attend births. And every time I get a call, I have to revisit that no and that place inside of me of what my priorities are. So that was a big stop in my career. So how did the Bohemian Balabusta come out of that? So I started teaching, mostly stopped with births. I was teaching childbirth education. I was teaching the laws of Jewish family purity, and refresher courses for married women, kind of cleaning up the mess of their the education they received in their engagement that wasn't real enough or satisfying enough or a full picture of marriage enough. And so I had a participant who took one of my refresher courses who approached me a few months later saying how my course completely changed her marriage, completely changed her sex life. And both her and her partner came up to me and said, like, the Jewish world needs this. You need to put this out there. And I was like, okay, like, what does that mean? So he's very much into social media and high tech. And so he was like, you need to start an Instagram page. And I was like, what? Like, we just got smartphones 2 years ago. This is not our vibe. We don't do social media. So he's like, you're going to come to my office. I'm going to show you how it works. And so he explained it to me. I was a little weirded out, like why would someone just want to like watch me in my kitchen? Like what is social media? But I figured like, why not? I'll go for it.
You
And
know
then,
why? Can I just
yeah,
jump
tell
in?
me.
Because they're not
Yeah,
looking at
sure.
your kitchen, they're looking at you. And just by the way, every time you show up on social media, you look beautiful and radiant. I'm like, how does she do it? But anyways, continue.
Thanks. That's very kind. It's very kind. No, but just to address that point, and then I'll go back to what I was saying, is that in terms of motherhood, like that was such an important realization for me that
Mhm.
waking up in the morning and getting myself dressed the way that I feel put together. So my goal is not to look radiant, but I want to feel like I'm in my own skin, not like I'm, like an over exhausted mother.
Mhm.
So anyway, so I started this Instagram, Bohemian Balabusta, just kind of like the name came to me. I was like, well, who am I? What is my vibe? That's what I am. And
Yeah.
that's the name I want. So I went for it. In the first year, it grew to about 5,000 followers. In the second year, it grew to about 45,000 followers. And now it's like over 55,000, something like that. It's just growing quickly, which is
Phenomenal.
really amazing. And it's building an amazing community.
That's phenomenal. What does being a mom mean to you? I know you said, you stopped being a doula because your priorities were your kids or someone else's kids, and you felt like they were putting their needs before yours. So, what does it mean
Sure.
to you to be a mom? And has that meaning changed and evolved over the years?
Yeah, so I think I want to answer your question, the second part first. I think in the beginning, when someone's pregnant with their first kid, we have all these ideals. My kid's never going to watch TV. My kid's never going to have a pacifier. My kid's never like things that like I'm going to be the perfect ideological mother, and this is who I'm going to be. And then when you actually get thrown into motherhood, we actually realize that there's no prototype that we have to fit in and fill in the blanks in order to be what is mother. That mother is actually finding the parts within ourselves that are giving and caring and um, vulnerable to raise the person in front of us. That it's not just taking care of a child. I don't feel that motherhood is just taking care of a child. It's looking at what is the soul of this child? How can I help it flourish? How can I help it grow? Where do I need to step back? Where do I need to step in? Where am I controlling? Where am I projecting? Who is this soul and how can I give it space to bloom in its own way? And I think that so much of motherhood is actually me learning about myself. I think children
Yes.
are intuitively themselves. Little kids are impulsive and their souls are the same way. They just are who they are without
Yeah.
any of that drama. And so much of child rearing and being a mother is actually realizing how we sometimes try to dictate or manipulate our children into being something that they're not. And so much of motherhood for me is trying to hold space for this soul and guide it, like very much like a lighthouse. I'm here and I'm kind of guiding you, but like you're out there. You're out there on your own, but I am your pillar that will always keep you grounded.
Mm.
That's how I envision motherhood. Yeah.
That's beautiful because it kind of takes the not really the onus, but the spotlight off the mom because it's all about what kind of mom are you? Are you a good mom? Are you a perfect mom? It's not about the mom themselves. And I recently came to this realization because as children progress and get older, their light, their soul, their neshama is shining in different ways. And we have to navigate it together. But like you said, they are showing the way. That is their path. And we have to accept it. We have to work with it and not project our own feelings and our wants, obviously within the right realm. But I absolutely love the way you frame that it's the child who's taking the lead.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it's the child that's taking the lead, but um, let me think of an example. Like if you imagine like you're teaching your kid to ride a bike. There's a certain point where you let go of the bike, but you're like right there kind of spotting them. You're not holding the bike, making sure nothing bad is happening and controlling the situation, but you're spotting them. And that's how I envision my role with my children, that they're leading the way, but I'm right there spotting them, and I'm happy to, kind of push them into the right direction. And, especially now that I'm entering the world of preteens and realizing that they can also say, I don't need you to push me in the right direction. I'm okay. And what that brings up for me, like that's my work to do, and that's not our children's work to do. So it's very humbling. Motherhood is a very humbling journey, I feel, of really inviting women to really look at themselves and big personal growth for a mother, if we
Absolutely.
choose to go that way.
Exactly.
If
If
we
we
choose to go
choose
that
it.
way.
Yeah. And we
Yeah,
just become better people if we choose that route.
exactly. Exactly.
So on this podcast, Spark by Hollywood, I highlight Hollywood and celebrity paradigms. As a society, as you know, we look up to them. People see celebrities as the ultimate. They have the fame, they have the wealth, and it seems like they raise their families in the best conditions, right? They show paparazzi pictures of their children as they're growing up or as they're taking them on lavish trips. And it may seem to the world like they have it all. So I'm going to share two short posts of Hollywood celebrities from past Mother's Days. So Jessica Alba, she penned a sweet post in honor of her three children. She said, quote, "The three of you have given me the gift of hopes, dreams, and possibilities I never knew existed. And most importantly, the courage to fearlessly go after it all. I love you, my babies." End quote. And Claire Crawley said, she's the former Bachelorette star, and she shared a heartfelt tribute to her mom, who at the time was battling Alzheimer's and dementia. And she said, quote, "Names may not be remembered and memories may fade away. But one thing that will never take away is the love between a mother and a daughter." End quote. So what are your thoughts on celebrity paradigms and motherhoods, and maybe specifically these two tweets specifically?
Yeah. So I'll be on, we don't have a TV, so I don't know so much about a celebrity in news about them, but specifically with these two tweets that you mentioned, I think that like specifically with Jessica Alba was saying that um, that her children have taught her to move forward fearlessly. And I feel like that really 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 resonates with me. I mean, I have
Hmm.
four very high energy children, one in particular that is so fearless. It was terrifying to raise him as a
Hmm.
toddler. Like, ooh, pool, great, I'm jumping in, like very fearless. But so I think it's important for children to have some sense of fear so that they can keep themselves safe. But for me, raising a child where you see them living fearlessly in the world, like, I'm going to go up to that kid and say hi and become friends on the playground, like, just without any of that um, internal conflict that holds us back
Hmm.
in life. We can learn so much from our children from that. Really, they go for it. They have a vision. They jump into it. They have something that they imagine in their mind. They can draw it out. They're willing to make friends. They're willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to go new
Hmm.
places. It's amazing. And I think that as mothers, especially mothers, because we are constantly, so many of us are so constantly worried about judgment from other people or other
Hmm.
mothers, what we're doing right, what we're not doing right, mom shaming, right? That there's so
Right.
much to learn specifically about motherhood, about just be your own light, and you were made for your children and your children were made for you, and move forward fearlessly. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think that hopping on that last point that you said, there are so many dimensions of being a mom, as you know, and people do compare themselves to others. But if we look at who the mom is as a role, on the one hand, by the very nature of her description, uh, she's a nurturer. She nurtures her children. At the same time, those moms who are married, they also give time and energy and love to their husbands. And then, of course, there is themselves, the woman as an individual. And it seems that for many people, women normally put the needs of others before themselves. I know I'm guilty of this many times. What are your thoughts on this?
So that has been my personal growth journey, at least for the last like 7 years of growing out of that um, give over giving and people pleasing. I also think, if I'm honest, I think that was a big part of my leaving the birth world also. I think
Mm.
that when I, as myself, an innate giver,
Hmm.
um, giving so much that I could be out of birth and not realize that I've had to go to the bathroom for the last 30 hours because I'm here for this woman, that was like a huge wake up call for me that um, if we don't take care of ourselves, everything falls apart. And I think that a lot of us as women, we have that tendency, whether we're innately like that or we were trained to be like that, or maybe just, from being told when we were children our whole lives of, to get good grades and do this and do that, like pleasing the needs of the pressures put on us. I think that there's a point in our life where we may realize that maybe I don't know who I am. Maybe I have no energy left. Where do I fuel up? Is all of my self-worth and self-love coming from external opinions and external
Hmm.
commentary? That has to come from within. It has to come from within if we actually want to feel alive in our lives, because we can just
Hmm.
move through the motions of being alive without actually feeling that we are fueling from within ourselves. And I feel like that is the magic recipe of conscious, genuine motherhood that we can
Hmm.
give, but it's not um, taking out our energy, because we have a way to re-energize from within ourselves. And it's different, I don't really think that that is like, getting manicures or a massage. Those are all great things that are really fun moments in time. But
Hmm.
moments in time aren't changing the dialogue of how we think of ourselves in terms of self-worth or taking care of ourselves in a deeper way. Did I eat enough today? Did I hydrate myself well today?
Hmm.
We tend to think about how we relate to food in terms of like, well, we should be eating or shouldn't be eating, or this diet or that diet. That's not nurturing ourselves. That's also controlling ourselves, just like things like outside of our reality are controlling us. And
That's right.
creating that internal dialogue of I am worthy, I love myself, and that is okay for me to choose to invest in loving myself. It is okay for me to take up space. And here's the key point, that when I do that, someone else is not going to suffer. Your children are not going to suffer because you decided to take 7 minutes to make yourself an amazing sandwich for lunch and sit down instead of making an extra fancy dinner, right?
Mm.
It's someone else doesn't suffer from us paying attention to ourselves. And that is what helps us bring the balance.
Wow. So it sounds like the message that we have to give ourselves when we're doing the self care and self awareness is that someone else is not suffering because of it. And it kind of takes away that mom guilt that so many of us carry with us.
Totally, totally. Mom guilt is serious. And even though I try to practice this in my life, I still have mom guilt.
Oh, of
We never
course.
know if we're
Yeah.
doing the right thing. We don't know if, you know, the school we're sending our kid to is the right school, or the way we handle the situation was the right situation, or, we don't know, but we're doing our best. But I think that when we neglect ourselves for the sake of others, it ends up just leading to resentment, and our children can feel that and they can see that. They can see it on our face. So even if it seems outwardly that we're giving, energetically, they they aren't being as filled up as they could be. A
Mm-hmm.
fulfilled, nourished mother inside, a child feels that. They
Mm-hmm.
don't feel, potentially a child can feel as though energetically they're a nuisance to their mother because they feel that they are the source of draining their mother. They
Yeah.
just feel it. So when we have a responsibility to prioritize ourselves and to nurture ourselves, and that actually is the best gift we could give to our children, and because they'll be parents one day too. We're
Exactly.
changing that for the next generation.
By the mere fact that we're being a good example.
Exactly. Exactly.
And on the topic of nurturing and educating our children, there are actually two posts that you posted on Instagram that stand out in my mind, and it really impressed me greatly. In one post, I think maybe you were giving a class and you had asked your son to be independent, and he ended up making some delicious dish, which you showcased to everyone on Instagram. And you were so clearly proud of his innovation, proud of his independence. And for me, that stood out as true child empowerment and also empowerment of the woman to be able to let go and let their child express themselves.
I do remember that post. I think he made cupcakes, if I recall. So that child in particular is on the autism spectrum. And I have
Mm.
learned so much from having a child like him, because on the one hand, all my instinct wants to do is like protect him and do everything for him, because so many things can be so difficult. I mean, even like
Mm.
talking to a kid on the playground can be difficult. This instinct of like, I don't want him to experience any hurts. I'm just going to do everything for him all the time.
Mm.
And in my raising of him, I've realized that I can't protect him from the world. But it looked like on the surface, because I keep his
Right.
privacy also. So usually
Mm-hmm.
save his space to his difficulties also. But I think specifically in that situation, to have a child who sometimes has that inner voice, I can't, it's too hard. He hasn't been believed in by many people in the school system, and that
Mm.
leaves a mark. That my child had an idea, and I was going to be teaching a class or something. And I said, so why don't you make the cupcakes? I don't need to do it for you. And even me offering that, he was like, really? Like, you
Wow.
trust me? Like, we can do this? So we went to the store and I bought him, where you just add water and oil and all the directions are there, so that he really could do it on his own rather
Right.
than a recipe from scratch. It says exactly what you need. It's very clear, the order. And he did the entire thing by himself. Of course, we had a little safety instruction about the oven and how all that works,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm right here. But to really kind of step back, and for me, was like, okay, I believe in my child. If I genuinely, deeply, inside of my soul, believe in my child, he will, with time, really genuinely believe in himself. And so I have to kind of have this mental dialogue of like, don't look at the mess. It doesn't matter if the kitchen's a disaster. It doesn't matter if he messes up. Give him space to explore and to mess up. What's the worst that could happen? My kitchen's a mess, and maybe he gets a little boo boo, and he'll be okay, and he will
Mm-hmm.
believe in himself that he doesn't need me to navigate his life for him. And so I think that our children, when we believe in them and when we give them space to mess up and to learn from their mistakes, or to not mess up and to feel proud of themselves even when they do mess up, those are huge messages that I feel I am still unraveling in my adulthood, that I
Yes.
don't want to pass on to my children. I don't want to, I feel like I grew up with a lot of like, you have to do things right, you have to do things perfectly. Like, and I don't want to pass that on. I want to pass on to my children that they believe in themselves, they're proud of themselves, they can learn new skills, they can make mistakes, they can learn from their mistakes, and that everything they do is a learning experience, and that's important to me. So that
Absolutely.
was that post, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I want to bring up the second post that you recently posted on Yom HaZikaron, which totally blew my mind. You commemorated this day that for so many children, it's just like a day on the calendar. Yeah, people fell, soldiers fell over the years, or people's lives were taken in terrorist attacks. And you took your kids to the grave sites of friends or community members who were murdered in those terrorist attack and various terrorist attacks over the years. And again, I was blown away because you took a moment, which is just for many, just a day on the calendar, and you made it into a teachable moment for your kids and give meaning to your children. And for me, just realizing it's not just like people that, meaning for me, what I saw the message as letting your kids know it's not just that these people's lives were taken, but there's a place we can go visit them. They are holy. They are kiddoshim. They are people that we can daven at their graves. We can make meaning out of it. And I was just blown away again by that aspect of education that you shared with your kids and then shared it with the world.
Cool. Thanks. That's really nice to hear. With those posts, people can really respond in different ways. So hearing your feedback is really encouraging. When you post things on social media, you can get messages like yours, and then you can get messages like, what are you doing taking your kids to a cemetery? It's like, you never
Yeah.
know. Everyone is triggered by these things. So
Yes.
with that post in particular, again, it all comes down to, I feel like so much of my personal experience and what I'm growing out of, and childhood things that I don't want to pass on. And so in that situation, I feel like as a child, death was hidden from me so much that I developed such a fear
Mhm.
of death in my adulthood. We never went to cemeteries. If someone died and there was a funeral, we never went. We don't
Mm,
talk about it. I don't really like talk about bad things that happen so much because I assume my parents, they didn't want me to feel scared trying
right.
to protect me. But I've learned that overprotecting our child, it's not like teaching them like facing the real world, but there's a sense of like what is normal in life. And I think specifically living in Israel, which is definitely, it's a beautiful place, but there's a certain intensity here that is different,
Yeah.
than other countries, because there are terrorist attacks and because bad things do happen and because there are
Mhm.
threats out there. I feel that we have, at least in my family, I don't want to speak for the entire country. I feel like we have a serious value of life and really,
Mhm.
really, really, really appreciating the gift of life and really honoring those that their bodies are no longer here and what their souls can bring into our lives and inspire us. And so on a day like Yom HaZikaron, rather than, kind of giving like like a less than PG version of what it is, like we say the truth, that, people died and these are their stories and we can keep them alive and let's go visit them and just breaking those taboos. And, my husband and I were always we watch our children, we can tell when maybe it's too much, like we're very cautious of how much we offer, the
Mhm.
details of situations we don't, but exposure is important. And I think specifically in the last year, my husband's mother passed away about a year and a half ago, and that
Mm.
was huge for our family. That was huge. And my husband takes our kids there, to her grave every
Mhm.
week, and they make pictures for Safta, and we keep her
Wow.
alive, and they feel
Yeah.
that they have a place to go to connect to her. So connecting to these other beautiful souls that were killed in awful ways from our neighborhood that my kids didn't even know, they have a respect for the dead and they have a respect of still wanting to do mitzvot in their honor since they're not here. And I think that that's a really important life lesson that makes our kids, it's like it's a part of life.
Yeah.
And normalizing it makes life a lot less scary when we actually see what happens in life, at an age appropriate level, of course.
Oh, for sure,
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that that's also what's important is that you give them the Jew appropriate response. Someone was
exactly.
killed. Yes, there's days of mourning, there's years of mourning. We feel them, we feel the loss of their bodies, but we can do mitzvot. We can commemorate them with good deeds and be proud of ourselves as Jews. We just do these things and we celebrate life and the cycle of life. So I absolutely love how you instill this in an appropriate way for your children.
Yeah.
um, I want to ask you about your classes that you give. I know in the beginning of the interview I asked you about the different things you do, and you mentioned that you give classes and you got courses. I know you have a course called the Sacred Woman's Moon Course. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and if anyone's interested in taking it, how they can reach out to you?
Sure. So I've been teaching for about 13 years, on the topics of the career I was in: birth and postpartum and childbirth education and Kala teaching. And then when I opened up my Instagram and people were writing to me, okay, so what do you actually do? And I started explaining what I teach. I
Mm-hmm.
must have had like 50 plus women asking if they could learn with me. Their Kala learning, they felt like, was
Wow.
missing a lot of information. And then it turned into this like, oh my gosh, like I can't teach all these women. That's a waiting list of like several years. So
Yeah.
it was at that moment that I decided, okay, I'm going to rebrand my business and I'm going to teach online group courses. So I teach a Tarat Mishpacha refresher course, which is learning all about the halachot and what's behind it and connecting all
Mm-hmm.
the dots. So many of us were taught these laws in bullet points, but we don't really know why we're doing them or where it comes from or what happens if I have a specific situation, how to handle it. We're not taught how to jump into the halachic discussion of how to navigate through these laws. And I think that one of the most important pieces in my courses, in all of my courses, but this one in particular, I believe that women should be active participants in their life, so that even if they need to ask a shaila to a rav, you should
Mm-hmm.
understand what your question is and be able to understand what the answer is, being active in their experience. So there was that course. And then specifically the Sacred Woman's Moon course was started because of Instagram. You know, I had women that were wanting to learn with me that weren't just married Jewish women. Some of them were single women. Some of them were married non-Jewish women. Some of them are single non-Jewish women, a very diverse population. And specifically of women saying, you know, I'm this many years old. I've been married this many years. Obviously, I'm sexually active, but I don't even know what my body does and how it works. And I've had babies and I don't even know. Can you teach me? And so this course was started from there. It's basically the sexual health education class that all of us needed and probably didn't get, whether, again, from all different worlds, because I think sometimes people feel that just the religious world was lacking. But I can tell you, for me, having grown up not religious in the public school system, the only thing we were all being taught was how not to get pregnant. We weren't actually learning about women's health and sexuality at all either. So the Sacred Woman's Moon course is focused on body anatomy, physiology, the variety of birth control options, pros and cons of each, so a woman can make an empowered decision. And then also learning to live with our menstrual cycle, which is, again, another taboo that so many of us are taught to hate, and it's a nuisance and it's annoying. And I teach how to actually lean into it and what is it teaching us, and teaching us to slow down and live cyclically in sync with our female intuition, which is exactly what we need to survive as mothers and women. And then also healthy sexuality. And no question is a bad question, a stupid question, an inappropriate question. We go into all of it in a safe space, in a modest way, in a shame-free way. Just really creating a safe space where women can actually feel like, okay, I actually know what I'm like, I actually have knowledge now. And the missing part of that leads into what we're speaking about today of motherhood is that very often women were reaching out to me, can you make a course for my daughters, like for my teenager or whatever? And my answer always is like, no, because you should be teaching your daughter. So why don't you work with me? Let's work on getting rid of, biases. And I mean, I don't want to say like, the word your, but like in a woman has to reflect on how she understands sexuality. She has to understand her own body. She has to get rid of the shame. She has to get rid of all those biases that she's holding and feel knowledgeable and empowered. And then she feels that she is educated enough to pass that on. So that's been my approach. So a lot of women that actually take this course are taking it for themselves so that they can be the vessel to pass it on to their children. Which is interesting because with what you were asking me before about Yom HaZikaron, one of the other reasons that we're so honest with our children is we know that if we aren't honest with them and tell them what actually is going on with these piguim or whatever it is, they're going to find out from someone else in school. And I would say the same thing happens with sexuality.
Oh yeah.
If we are not that mentor and that safe, non-judgmental anchor for our children that they know they can come to us and ask us a question, and we're not going to judge them, and we're not going to give them some silly fake answer about birds and bees, and we're going to actually answer their question, then they're going to get the facts from us as opposed to other uneducated, people in their school that learned it from their big sister. So I feel mothers, again, we are that lighthouse, we are that pillar, and we have to stand in that confidence. I know what I'm doing, even when I don't feel like what I'm doing, and let me spread a light onto my children.
That's fascinating. I love how you created an opportunity that someone's asking you to teach their daughters, and you turn that around to empower them, because you're right. This is a job of a mom. This is a job. It's not just about teaching them how to use pads. We can give them the full proper story. And as they have questions, as they get older, they should be coming back to mom. Or if we don't know the answer, we can direct them to the right professional. But it is our sacred duty to pass on this literal Masorah from generation to generation in a very nice, beautiful way.
Exactly. And it starts from a young age. I feel like, the way that we teach our young children about their bodies when we're potty training them and how to wipe in the right direction, all of those things, the dialogue of sexuality starts at such a young age, and we can start to create that like totally chill, non-judgmental conversation with such private things between a mother and her children. And that can continue when they do get to the stage of like, okay, I heard the word pads in school. What does that mean? How do I use it? Right.
Right.
And the dialogue and the trust, it's already there. And so it really allows for, back to the quote from the other celebrity you were talking about, that the love between a mother and a daughter, or I would say like a mother and all of her children, that she is this safe space for them to bring all of their stuff, whether it's questions or problems in their life. And I feel like we're blessed to be in that position as mothers, for sure.
Agreed. 100%. Before we end off, Malka Khana, is there one message, one takeaway that you would like to share with my audience that stands out as a big aha moment that they can take away from this?
I would say specifically, because this is about Mother's Day, that Mother's Day is really special for women to feel love from their children and their husbands, receiving flowers and gifts. But if you are not celebrating Mother's Day from within yourself and celebrating you just as much as the expectations you're putting on the people around you, then there's work to do. That Mother's Day, you should be showering yourself in all of that love and appreciation just as much. And it's nice to be appreciated from the outside, but creating that inner dialogue from the inside is what can make life so lovely and our relationship so beautiful. So blessing you on your journey to jump in to do the hard work of loving yourself from within through womanhood and motherhood and lover and all of those titles that we have.
I love that. You summed that up so well. Before we actually end off, can you tell my listeners how they can find you? How can they sign up for your courses, connect with you?
Sure. So right now, the best way to be in touch with me is on Instagram. As you mentioned, my handle is Bohemian Balabusta. I do all of the direct messaging, all the DMs myself, so I will actually see your message. You're welcome to follow along there. And then all of my courses and blog posts, etc., are all on my website, which is www.bohemianbalabusta.com. You can see all of my courses, my products, my books, with full descriptions. Everything you need to know is there. And that's it.
Amazing. I felt that the words that you spoke really came from your heart. And my blessing to all my listeners, my audience, is that it just enters their heart. And this conversation just makes the world a little bit better place. And someone picks up some message and feels a little better about themselves and gives them that empowerment that they need.
Amen. Amen. So I know you and I both believe in all of your listeners here, that they're amazing, and I believe in you, but we also want them to I believe in me. I believe in myself. And that's the goal. Exactly. And the world would be a much better place for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode. If you are loving the Spark by Hollywood podcast, kindly leave me a 5-star review on the platform that you're listening on. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Sparked by Hollywood. That's where the conversations happen. That's where I give you extra content on all my episodes and where you can send me your feedback, your comments, and questions. And finally, in a world where we are all enamored by the spark of Hollywood and its celebrities, always remember your own spark that you carry within you that makes you the gift that the world needs to shine that much brighter. I'll catch you in the next episode.